Welcome to Nothing But the Truth. I'm Trudy Stern. The wars of the future aren't coming, they're already here. Over the past few months, we've watched military history unfold in real time. During the conflict with Iran, after an American Apache helicopter went down near the Straits of Hormuz, the two crew members were rescued not by another manned vessel racing into danger, but by an unmanned Navy surface drone. It reached them first and carried them away to safety, and it was the first operational rescue of its kind, a remarkable demonstration of how autonomous technology is changing warfare. We've also watched Ukraine repeatedly use relatively inexpensive unmanned aerial and maritime drones to destroy warships, strike strategic targets deep behind enemy lines, and force one of the world's largest militaries to rethink how it fights. Time and again, small autonomous systems have accomplished missions that once required expensive aircraft, ships, or large numbers of troops. And during Operation Rising Lion, Israel demonstrated the extraordinary effectiveness of integrating drones, artificial intelligence, precision guided weapons, and real time intelligence into a coordinated campaign showing how technology is increasingly shaping success on the modern battlefield. The lesson is unmistakable. The battlefield has changed. Today's wars are no longer defined solely by tanks, fighter jets, or the number of soldiers on the ground. Increasingly, they are being shaped by autonomous systems, artificial intelligence, robotics, and advanced software. These technologies don't replace the courage of the men and women who serve. They make them more effective, extend their reach, and perhaps most importantly, reduce the need to send them into the most dangerous situations. The race to develop these technologies isn't just about building better weapons. It's about preserving lives, strengthening deterrence, and ensuring that America maintains its military advantage in an increasingly dangerous world. My guest today has fought on the battlefields of yesterday and is helping build the battlefields of tomorrow. Mike LeBlanc is a former United States Marine Corps major who served both as an infantry officer and an intelligence officer, leading Marines in combat and serving in Afghanistan and in the Middle East. After his military service, he earned his MBA from Harvard Business School before co-founding Cobalt Robotics, an industry-leading company that pioneered the use of autonomous security robots powered by artificial intelligence. Today, Mike is the co-founder of Foundation, where he is helping develop the next generation of defense technology and autonomous systems designed to strengthen America's military capabilities and better protect the men and women who serve. There are very few people who understand both how wars have been fought and how they'll be fought in the future. But Mike LeBlanc is one of them. So we are so honored to have you, Mike, and welcome to Nothing But the Truth.
Thanks so much, Trudy. What an intro. I love that.
We're so happy to have you. Over the past uh, 2 years, we've discussed a lot about how the battlefield has changed and how the tools and weapons of war have changed. So I think this discussion is particularly important, and I'm very excited to hear about how you're on the forefront of changing that. But before we get to foundation, tell us about your observation about how things have changed on the battlefield generally.
It's war is so interesting to me because I originally got interested in the military by reading Thucydides' History of the Peloponnesian War. So long ways back. And there are some things that never change in war. And that's what makes it kind of so exciting is that human nature is always going to be what it is, and we're always going to find new ways to pull off the same principles. So when I was in Afghanistan, which would have been 2011, 2012, uh, you know, robots were not really a part of what we were fighting with. We had some small drones that they were trying to push down to the individual units, and you might have them go. I would have them go for, we called it route clearance, but really it was a tiny little view that it would have, and there was nothing that you could see anyway. It was one of those things that you were trying to get these robots involved just to have them involved, almost like a DEI robot initiative because they just weren't useful. And if they were not there, you didn't care. Uh, Today, right? I've been to Ukraine 3 times this year, And in Ukraine, you're seeing exactly the opposite, which is robots are the ones that are fighting the major operations, and humans are the supplemental figure in the back. So we've gone from complete using robotics as a tool to really having robotics as the soldiers and having the, what we would call in the Marine Corps the main effort, right? The ones that are going to actually win the mission, the ones that need to be supported are the robots. So that's entirely new and very promising, I think, for what we'll see in the death count of this century versus last century.
Well, okay, so describe that more about the drones, not the drones, but the robots on the battlefield. So I wasn't aware of that. I'm not sure that anybody listening was aware that in Ukraine they're doing that. Ukraine seems to be on the forefront of all of these tools, being a tremendous drone manufacturer and usage of drones also.
Yeah, so it was, when I was in Afghanistan, the idea would be humans were running the mission. We had trucks, we had heavy machine guns, etc. And robots were one of those tools that you might request. They had, some predators and reapers, right? The really high flying ones that could drop bombs in case you needed them. But that was really the extent of drone strikes. Was saying, all right, we're going to go after some high worth individuals. We're going to, cover patrols. Today, there are so many drones of all different sizes across the battlefield, and those come from Ukraine and those come from Russia. And it's amazing to see because they're all plugged in. I don't know if people have seen this, but the drones are plugged in because of cybersecurity reasons. So you see, I mean, it looks, it looks almost like, spaghetti up there, or like something tangled. You can't believe it's, the behind of the TV when you have your Nintendo hooked up. That's what's going on. That's where the major fighting is going on. So it's not something that's going to look that cool in a Christopher Nolan movie someday, right? Until they get rid of all those things. But you really see that's where the war is happening. They will be determining their targets from that. They're doing their patrols with different drones and different UGVs, they call them, unmanned ground vehicles. So they're kind of picture an ATV with like a heavy machine gun on it, but it's autonomous. So that's what they're running these missions with. So instead of sending a squad of Marines who'd be, 12 guys with rifles walking around and seeing what's going on, they'll now send ATVs to go do that. Instead of having a logistics train with a bunch of soldiers on it, they're going to have the same ATVs pulling those on. They take off the weapons and they use them for logistics. So it's really incredible to see just how much on the forefront robots are.
So are you considering drones robots also?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, drones. I think that it's funny, right? The old definition of a robot is something that doesn't work because as soon as a robot does work, we call it a dishwasher or a drone or right, it gets a name once it works. Otherwise, before then we call it robots. But absolutely, drones are completely robotics. And so that's what we're really looking at is, in the air, robots would be drones. UGVs are the ones that drive through the battlefield. There are a lot of subsurface robotics. There are ones that are now going on just surface sea, so on top of the oceans, and then humanoids, and then some dogs. So those are kind of the robot form factors that are taking over right now.
So how much of the advancements in AI play into the capabilities of these robots?
Well, so I had my first robotics company in 2017 that we started it. And back then I had a team of three guys that we had a budget of I think $3 million to just work on this for years of trying to get a robot to open a door. At my latest company, Foundation, the engineers were able to figure that out in 6 weeks. So it's just so much faster that you're able to do all of these things because of generative AI. And that includes from, being able to just move much faster on code and being able to write code faster. But the real breakthrough is all of these different models, the AI models of how the robot actually views the world and interacts with it. So we now have robots that instead of having to send them up with exact coordinates and do something that we consider robotic, that is now becoming, the same as human judgment, just as we've seen autonomous vehicles.
So who controls this AI? Like how much remains proprietary and how much do you build off of others? How do you safeguard the AI that you have?
So each company is really going after this. So any humanoid company, any drone company now is trying to really turn into an AI company. And so that at Foundation, my company, that's what we do at the heart of it is our AI models. That is, that's where we're hiring a lot of talent. That's where we're trying to get everybody involved to make the best models with the best information. I think there are a lot of people that are in that race right now, and then there are some people that are in the race of commoditizing drones or humanoids or whatever robot that they're trying to make the bodies as cheap as possible. So they're kind of betting that there's going to be a brain that is a software and then hardware that is going to be the body. But most of the companies right now that are leading are vertically integrated. So we build the brain and the body.
Okay. And would you say that technology has become as important as troop strength in determining the outcome of a conflict?
Well, it's really interesting if you look if you look at the 20th century as a guide, uh, you end up seeing that the team with more technology does not always win, right? And in fact, it's just a little bit over half the time in the wars in the 20th century that the country with more with a technological advantage actually won the war. An easiest example on that to look at is Vietnam, right? You can look at Vietnam, you can think of, all of what we saw in Iraq, all of what we saw in Afghanistan, of when there are people that play by different rules and they are fighting with asymmetric warfare, that's where technology starts to lose its advantage. So I think the really interesting thing that we're seeing today, though, is that with robotics, you're actually starting to replace the soldier. So all of a sudden, you're able to do almost insurgent asymmetric attacks like humans would have done in the last century, but you're now able to do that with technology. And I think that's pretty much unprecedented. I mean, there's always been some passive form of warfare. From the first wars, there would be people digging big pits and putting, spikes at the bottom of them for somebody to fall in. That's kind of like a makeshift landmine. There have always been things like that. Uh, but this is pretty unprecedented to be able to have something that is passive, not needing human to actually be risking their lives, but also able to make decisions and to kill.
So the robots that are also making judgment calls.
Yeah, so right now it's very interesting. It goes country by country from what I can tell. So in the US, I have never had a conversation with anyone from Pentagon, from any of the military branches that has not included a human in the loop. Everyone either completely assumes that a human will be in the loop, meaning that they will actually make the decisions about what the robot does, or they make sure to make a big point out of that. Anything contractual that we've done has included they need to see it. And we have very sophisticated infrastructure around this because of drones. So that was one of the things that I was doing when I was in Bahrain 2014, right, against ISIS. Uh, we were one of the middling layers of approvals in dropping bombs from drones. So the drones were going overhead, and I would have my whole intelligence team that was looking at all these things, and I'd have to get on a video like this, and I'd have to say, we've done a pattern of life study for the past 72 hours. This many people have gone in, this many people have gone out. This is why we think, the person is in there. You'd have to give all of this information. I think that's how most Americans are still thinking that all of these robots will work.
Do you think that's a negative in that? So I actually just we just bought a Tesla, and it's on self-drive a lot of the time that we're in it. And I at first I did not think I would be able to trust self-drive, and I would, that would be a ridiculous feature. I almost felt I didn't need that. And now I feel like it's so much safer. I was driving yesterday and there was a lot of glare and I was backing out. And I immediately put it on to self-drive because I said, oh, like I can't see because it's very glary, but this is going to be, let me put it into self-drive. So here in the United States, we're not yet there in terms of having the robots make judgment calls.
Yeah, I think that the robots are going to be able to make incredible good judgment calls. It's just going to take data, right? So a lot of what we're doing is trying to collect the most combat data out of anybody. That's video data of being able to actually see how do people make these decisions. And then there are also just other layers of being able to track, right? If someone shoots at the robot, being able to track that same individual, that's become way easier with AI that you can actually just follow that person even if they run behind a car and come back out. And I think we're going to run into a lot of the same debates that we have with autonomous vehicles, right? I'll never forget. I mean, everybody's seen this, like, what was it? The Amazon truck that was like dragging a body, right? The autonomous vehicle, it's like dragging a body for a block. That's hard to forget. But what goes unseen is, how many the countless car accidents and tragic car accidents across the United States every year that are by human drivers. And, the battlefield for the most part is it's like our freeways, or, like going out in traffic, except almost everybody is 18 years old. So you have almost all teen drivers, and everyone is trying to be fatal. So, when you look at that, the human versus what we're going to get with, autonomy, I think that we're going to see autonomy grow a lot faster than people think.
I mean, it might also just be the culture here in the United States of, or just in the world of not yet trusting um, robots to make the judgment calls on the battlefield. Whereas I think other cultures, other societies, like perhaps China, might be, you know, less reticent to trust the robot.
I
Uh,
think that it's really tough because, I this is now my second tech company. I'm not a tech guy. I don't like technology. I don't, I like to pull my drapes closed. I don't have a machine that does them because I think those things tend to break. I don't know how to fix them. I don't know how to use them. So I really am a Luddite in that way. And so I think I come at it from that angle. But when you're really looking at the data of, how many car parts are put in finished packaging or something, robot versus human, it becomes very clear as the decision maker that's the way to go. And I think that's the same that we're going to see with civilian deaths, the same that we're going to see with, with our own deaths of our soldiers and with kills for the enemy.
wow. Well, in terms of foundation, so now tell us about foundation. Foundation is developing humanoid robots for military applications, from what I have read. And for people who are hearing this for the first time, tell us what exactly Foundation is building, what problems are you trying to solve in the American military, and just tell us about Foundation.
We've been around for just a little over 2 years, and we are just moving to our second robot. So our first robot was a 5'10" humanoid robot. It's in the shape of a human. Our next robot is 6 foot, 185 pounds. Right. So you're picturing like a big guy, like a soldier. I think that we're the biggest out of the humanoids that are coming out right now. A lot of them that you'll see are only 4 feet or something like that. But these robots are going to be able to interact with the human world that we already have built. And so, that's been the big question is what form factors do we need for all of the robots on the battlefield? And we've definitely seen a lot with drones that I think are very obvious use cases. The UGVs, those ATVs that drive around, I think those have become clear. Dogs, people are really questioning. But the goal with the humanoid is to unlock the arsenal that we've built and acquired for humans. So think about how much we've spent on weapons, vehicles, tools, etc., that only a human knows how to use. The human form factor is going to be able to use all of those. And so that is the idea around a humanoid is not only can it carry logistics, but it can drop a mortar, it can set up a bomb, it can dismantle a bomb, it can do anything that we've been using humans for throughout history.
And these particular, so how much does each one cost to make?
We're getting the cost down, but right now we sell them commercially for 100,000 per year per robot. With defense, we've worked some different structures because of how they buy, but so we don't have a clear cut answer for what that is yet.
So they're not only being used in defense. So what other tasks can they do?
No, well, this was something that I learned while I was at the Pentagon, right? Was I was looking at startups that were trying to get into the military. And one of the big things that you're looking at in that job is if something is just for defense or if it is what they call dual tracked, which means they sell it commercially and dual tracked. You want something dual tracked for defense and commercial because they're going to make more strides commercially. There's going to be a lot more money that goes into it. There's going to be a lot more development. You're going to get a lot more hours, et cetera. And so that's exactly what we've done with Foundation. So we do have right now, the majority of our robots are in auto manufacturing. And I think this kind of goes back to just, what good citizen soldiers are, right? Is that in peacetime, you're working a job, you're building something, you're manufacturing, and when a war comes, you're going out and fighting. And so that's the robot that we've developed.
So what can this robot do?
Right now, it is very much focused on pick and place tasks. So that is, in a factory, that'll be seeing a lot of injection molded parts. That'll be working with other machines, doing quality control checks, and then packing up parts and being able to send them, from one manufacturing plant to another. So they fit within where there are, tens of thousands, I mean, around the world, hundreds of thousands of jobs of people just working this 8-hour shifts, 24 hours a day. And so we had, I believe, the first robot last September that worked 24-hour shifts. We do that 5 days a week, and so we've taken that line since September. Right, the customer has never had to go back to it, and that's really where you start to learn all of this resilience of what it takes to get a robot to not be breaking down, not to fall over, not to not to have screw ups. You're learning a lot of that in the manufacturing plant, and then we've been bringing that to the Army, the Air Force, the Navy, and then now in discussions with Ukraine.
So what kind of tasks can it do in the army at this point?
Right now, we've done it across a lot of different points in the military. I think a lot of people have different ideas about where it'll enter. The main thrust of our work has gone around Air Force maintenance. So the Air Force has a bunch of aircrafts like a drone that they would want to send out. And somebody needs to do what they call tier one maintenance. Just go, make all the checks on it, do all of the small fixes, make sure that the tires have air in them, etc. And then be able to do some light repairs and refueling. The goal is that instead of having a drone that, sits in Indonesia and then you have to hire pilots, if it were a manned aircraft, you'd have to have pilots, you'd have to have security for those pilots, you'd have to have logistics come to feed those pilots. The idea is to just have a drone and humanoids, with the humanoids able to do all of that early maintenance and all of the refueling so that you don't need any human footprint to be able to have drones around the world.
So you're calling humanoids the robots that look like humans?
Yes.
Okay. It sounds like some sort of movie from the future or something.
Yeah,
So
it's a name I don't love, but it's the name that our industry's taken. But I think that it does. Humanoid is you're seeing a lot of them run marathons these days. You're seeing them break dance. You're seeing them, compete on like Who Wants to Be a Chef, whatever. But really, getting these robots into war, I think is going to be one of the critical factors that we see truly saving lives. I know that it can be a scary thing at first to think about robots, but when you really think about sending an 18-year-old, a 19-year-old in their place, this should have a big effect on how many lo lives we lose.
well, it's very interesting to hear that what the humanoids are doing right now, or the robots, that they're doing menial tasks that, like when we think of robots in war or on the battlefield, we think of them doing the more sophisticated types of things and not because we're thinking AI is part of the whole process. We're not thinking they're filling the the plane tires with air. We're thinking they're actually
Yes.
like driving the train, and then you really don't have any humans needed. So
And they'll get there soon. So that's the interesting thing, right? It's very much a crawl, walk, run model. And so you're trying to make these robots as useful as possible as early as possible because that's where you learn the most. That was why we went to Ukraine in the first place. Not because we thought that these robots were going to be Rambo and pushing people over to the side and grabbing a machine gun off the ground. Um, it was more that we said in the Marine Corps, you really get a lot more respect when you do a combat tour. People start wondering what you think after you do a combat tour. And we thought that's probably the same for a defense company, that you really do need this data. You need to actually see the battlefield. You need to get your product out there. You need to have your product shot down so that you can see what it's like to repair it. And it's through, all of those learnings that we're going to be able to iterate very quickly and then hopefully get the robots to the point that they are going out instead of a human and being able to do some of the Rambo Medal of Honor moves.
so is it your vision into the future that there aren't even armies of people anymore, that they're just these humanoids that are actually um, fighting?
There'll always be humans involved in war, just 100%. I don't think that will ever stop. I
Well,
think
what will be their role?
decision making, strategy and decision making. And that's something that I don't think that you are going to be able to hand off to an AI model, right? It's this thought of if you can't suffer, you really can't think strategically about how to defend your people. There's just something about that that is a kernel that will never change. But the tactics can change a lot, and so I very much hope that what we're going to see in this century is less of people on people, less of people on military on civilian or military on military, and more going after infrastructure, going after people economically. I think there are lots of ways to fight wars, and the end of war is to inflict suffering, enough suffering that the other person bends to your will. That doesn't need to be suffering through human deaths. It just doesn't. And so I think robots are going to play a big role in saving a lot of lives.
I think that's definitely a good thing, and I think I've heard you say that the big difference between our enemies and the United States is that we value life so much that it inhibits our ability to make certain decisions.
Well, I mean, you see that in Iran today, right? I think I don't know the exact numbers, but it's thousands dead, of Iranians dead, and less than 20 Americans that have died. But I think that is a stronger point in America that makes people want to pull out of Iran, right? Even with 20 deaths, that's too many for us. And I think that it's great that the American people have such a high standard for our military because we put a lot of money behind this, right? We're fighting right now for the $1.5 trillion budget to get it through Congress. That that really is the idea is yes, take our taxes, take our money, but we don't want our sons and daughters dying on the battlefield. We don't consider that a fair way to win wars if we're giving you this much money. And as somebody who's reported to investors for the past decade, I think that's a great investor input and one that we have to try to live up to.
Yeah, it's definitely a good one to live up to that. Um, how quickly do you see robots totally replacing humans on the battlefield?
I think that'll take a number of years. I think we'll see it a lot faster commercially. So right now we have thousands of robots going out. There are a couple other companies, Tesla included, that'll have thousands going out. Once that happens, I really think 2027 is going to be a year that all the big companies realize this is here to change core aspects of our business. Our operations are just going to be changed throughout the future. And as they do that, people will get used to working next to robots. A lot of people will have humanoids in the homes. People are just going to get used to this as a technology. And I think as that happens, we're going to continue developing these on the battlefield. But it'll be a while before it can do everything that a soldier really needs to do, right? There are a lot of challenges in uneven terrain and walking through mud and carrying heavy loads, in aiming weapons. All of these things require a lot of different skill, both hardware and AI, and then just general employment. But I do think over the next 5 years, people will be amazed to see what robots are doing on the battlefield.
So earlier this year, Foundation deployed its Phantom robots to Ukraine for reconnaissance operations. So, and I know you went there. You said earlier that you went there 3 times. So what did you learn when you were there? What surprised you most about this whole situation? What feedback did you get from soldiers?
I was most amazed to see just how much tech is really just a staple in this war, right? So when you drive into Ukraine, it's amazing. You download an app. There are several apps that do this, and they'll tell you when there are bombs coming in. So you're sitting at the hotel, you're sitting wherever, and everybody's phone starts to go off, and you hear these little sirens. And I would go down. They have bomb shelters all over. They'll guide you to the nearest bomb shelter, and everybody there is so used to it that they don't even move. They just keep drinking their beer, and they say, "No, I'm not gonna go down this time. What are the odds?" But it was amazing to see how much that was integrated into life. When you talk to other defense founders around there, I talked to a lot of companies that are putting robots and other technologies on the battlefield. It's amazing because they were all civilian companies before. right? So one of the companies that I talked to, they did all of the dubbing for the Star Wars movies for Eastern Europe, right? So they would turn them into Eastern European languages. That was their business before, and today they are a shot spotter that uses acoustics to be able to determine where shots are coming from. So it's been amazing to really see what a tech renaissance there has been on the battlefield there, and just kind of how homemade it's been, right? They didn't need to polish off old playbooks and then integrate robots. They've really put robots front and center.
Um, it's interesting because a lot of our listeners have ties to Israel, and in Israel, it's the same sort of situation with regard to sirens. Here in the United States, we all get the sirens on our phone, and they're, people run into the bomb shelters. So it's interesting that, you've experienced that in Ukraine. Um, how do you see other countries, enemies of ours, Iran, Russia, China, North Korea? Are they in, where are they, where do they stand with regard to robotics?
Well, as much as we like to talk about Ukraine and what Ukraine has done with drones and all of these things, so is Russia. Right. That entire conflict it's robot on robot. It is not robot on human for the most part. And there are some isolated cases of that, but it's really been incredible. Both sides have been doing that. China is using a lot of different robots in their military exercises. So they have robot dogs with machine guns on the backs of them. They put out videos of what that looks like for a human assault led by those dogs. Everybody's testing with this around the world, and so it's an interesting one too because I'm reminded of a stupid story, but I used to hang out with my buddies when I was a teenager, and we one time they were holding like a big aluminum bat, and I wasn't scared that anybody was going to hit me with the bat. We were all messing around, but then we started to come out with these Nerf bats, and I thought, oh, this is going to be a big fight, and we all just started beating the crap out of each other with these because you know that you're not going to kill somebody with a Nerf bat, right? So you're actually going to get hit with it. There's something very akin to that on the battlefield today. There was a nuclear arms race, but we really recognized if you use those nuclear bombs, it's going to be such a decision globally for people to come after you. There are so many ramifications to using nuclear bombs that arms race was very important, but now has been in a standstill for a long time. With robotics, these are sort of the Nerf bats. These are ones that you can actually use. And so I think we're going to see just as exciting of a race going on between countries to develop these robots as fast as they can to get them on the battlefield.
Um, do you have any idea how advanced China is with these robots, or not really?
It's interesting. There's a big assumption that gets made across a lot of investors in America that China is far ahead on robotics. Uh, I just haven't seen it. I really haven't. I think that if to me, the test of a robot is how useful it is. It's not how many marathons it can run. We don't need a marathon running robot, right? China's done really good on marathon running robots, but it's really how can you actually make this useful? How can you integrate it into human life? And that's where I think when you look at their biggest companies, Unitree is the one that people know. UBTech is the one that is probably bigger than Unitree. It's a public company in China. But you really see they have a lot of these robots out, but they're mostly in data collection that's sponsored by the government. They're mostly grants given by their government. They're not in useful positions that are doing real work. And so in that aspect, I think that America is ahead. I think that Foundation is very far ahead because that's what we're focused on is, not can we do a part of a task that looks cool? Can we open a beer for a Coors commercial? We're really trying to see can we replace three people on a shift that they've been forever not able to get somebody on grave shift and now they have a robot that can do it. Can we get people on the battlefield that can walk through an area that's filled with landmines instead of sending a human? Right. That's where I think America is very much ahead.
Are your humanoids or robots, are they focused on any one particular, are you focused on creating a humanoid for one particular part of the military?
We've been going kind of wherever the military sees fit. So the U.S. military has put $73 million to help us develop all of our technology for the battlefield already. And that's been everything from military operations in urban terrain, right? A robot that can shoot under cars and things like that, to very boring logistics tasks, to serving food on the battlefield, right? And I think a lot of that is kind of a self-discovery on the part of the military. They know what their needs are, and it's our job to jump on every test and to do those tests as well as we can so that they recognize that it is useful and they start scaling them.
So looking ahead 10 years, what do you think this battlefield is going to look like? And, what do you think we should all understand about where technology is going to take us?
I suspect that we're going to see a lot more small wars like we've been seeing. I think we're going to see a lot more small conflicts, things like Iran, like Nicaragua, um, places that are intervening, but more as part of a negotiation than they are just saying we're full scale war and we're going after it. So what that's going to look like tactically is really going to be a lot of robots and drones staged around the world that are ready to take action. In the 80s, this would have been sending a battle carrier, through some strait to show people that we were serious, or doing a training exercise near them. I think you're going to start seeing that staging of robots because you have this large attritable force that you don't care if they get shot down. That's never happened before, that you could send, soldiers somewhere. Think of Saving Private Ryan and all of the people getting off of those ships, right? The famous opening. Picture that then with robots. It's not tragic. Nobody cares. It's just a loss of money, right? And a loss of money can still make you suffer. It's still a loss of your military assets. It's still a real loss of your capabilities, but it's without the human suffering. It's without so many Gold Star families throughout the United States.
Do you see the military as shrinking, like the amount of people, not humanoids, but people in the military?
It should, but I doubt it. There's there's this amazing thing that goes on with technology. You know, you always look back in time, and in the 1900s they would write, "Oh, if we had all of this technology, nobody would work. There'll be nothing for anybody to do because farming will be all be automatic and these things." And then we get those machines, and we all work harder. It's just different work. So I think that there's a need for human beings to just keep running in and keep working. And with our military, I think that it's bizarre that our military is as large as it is right now. I think still the question of having such a large standing army is a real constitutional question, and a question for America, especially America with, you have the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean, which are pretty good defenses against anybody attacking us. To have such a large standing army is already, uh, kind of absurd to me. So as much as we're going to see these robots going out on the battlefields, I don't see a huge decrease in personnel.
Okay. When history looks back on this time, uh, say in 20, 30 years, so what do you think will be remembered as the most important transformation from the battles well, not just the battles, but the armies of yesterday and the armies of 30 years from now?
It's really going to see just how much is automated, and I think that's really going to happen in the AI. So right now we're still using drones very much as, we have kamikaze drones that you'll go fly into something and they blow up, on impact. That's a kind of barbaric use of the technology, right? Going back to Thucydides' history of the Peloponnesian War, that was when they began naval battles, but they would just pull up the ships next to each other and have essentially a land battle, but with ships next to each other. It took that war for them to really start routing, and for them to start realizing that they could start to direct geopolitics with ships. I think that's what we're going to see right now. Is these are the early stages of just using robots as a blunt instrument, but we're going to see that get very sophisticated very quick, and start turning into real automation on the battlefield.
So, lastly, just um, so robots don't make judgment calls. That's what you said earlier in the conversation. Do you ever envision a time when they will be able to make a judgment call?
I do. Yeah, I think that, to me, judgment is a very important category. It's one that I raise my kids, really. I think that a lot of parents try to get their kids to just say, we don't touch computers or something, but you actually want them to express judgment in all of these things, of when it is appropriate to touch a computer, when it's appropriate to shake a person's hand, etc. A lot of that is algorithmic. I think parents know this when they're teaching manners to their kids. It is you have to feel out the situation, but there are a lot of inputs that can help you make that decision. And I don't think that war is much different in that respect. I think that there are a lot of inputs, and sometimes those inputs can be very fast. But a robot should be more than capable of taking in all of those and making what we would consider a good decision under the circumstances.
So I personally, like anyone who uses ChatGPT, or any of those other types of services, would probably feel that they're not there with regard to judgment call at all.
No.
No matter what my prompts are with ChatGPT, I'm getting, no, that's not exactly right. That's not exactly it.
Yes.
Um, and really lastly, that was my fake lastly, really lastly, do you feel that we have an edge right now, the United States? And if so, how do we maintain that?
Well, I think we spend more money than anyone on defense. I think that we have more latent talent that if we ever were in a war that we all needed to step up, I think the world would be shocked by what Americans would do when the going gets tough. In the meantime, no, I don't think that we have the edge over someone like Ukraine or Israel. People that are fighting very often, right? There is a way that you just need to scrimmage this stuff. You need to work out the details. And I think that both Ukraine and Israel have better methods of procurement, of being able to bring in early technologies and being able to test them very quickly. The U.S. is making very big pushes on that. So I think that we're moving in the right direction. But turning, the Department of Defense, Department of War is like turning an oil tanker, right? You can't, it's not a motorboat. You can't just do a 180, and watch some waves. I mean, it is a slow turning. And so I think that's our biggest challenge ahead.
Well, Mike, thanks so much for joining us today. This
Thank
has been
you.
yeah, it has been a fascinating conversation, not only about where warfare is today, but where it's headed tomorrow. The battlefield's definitely evolving in front of our eyes. And as we've learned today, success in future conflicts will depend not only on the courage of those men and women who serve, but on America's ability to innovate faster than those who seek to destroy us. So thank you, thank you. And also thank you so much for your service to our country, both as a
Thank you.
United States Marine and for the important work you're doing today to help ensure that the next generation of American service members has every possible advantage on tomorrow's battlefield.
Thanks so much, Trudy. Great talking to you.
To our listeners, thank you for joining us. This has been Nothing But the Truth with Trudy Stern. You can catch us every Thursday night at 9:30 p.m. on the radio. And if you've missed any part of this show or want to listen to any of our past episodes, you can find Nothing But the Truth wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, stay strong, stay informed, and keep seeking nothing but the truth.